So welcome to this webinar on virtual fence cattle collars. We're very happy to welcome Natalie Payon from Shetland and Laura Sinclair from Shetland as well. Natalie works for the Species on the Edge project, and she's going to be talking about the kind of conservation benefits of the collars. And then Laura's been trialing one of the brands of collars out in Shetland, and she's going to tell us the highs and lows, the pros and cons, and how she's found them. And then we've got Sweeney coming, Donald McSween from Lewis, hopefully coming to tell us about the no fence collars. And again, he's going to talk about how he's found them.
So, yeah, as Celia said, I'm Natalie Pion. I work for the RSPB. I'm conservation advisor in Shetland. And part of my role is to lead the delivery of the Species on the Edge programme in Shetland. And I'm going to share this talk with Laura Sinclair, who is a crofter in Shetland and is taking part in this project. So I think we'll aim to speak for about half an hour at max. So I'll start with setting the context and briefly introduce the Species on the Edge project, and then get into a bit more details on the species and the habitats that we're focusing on, and bring in the cattle grazing as a conservation tool. And this will lead into the use of the cattle collars and how they're helping to address some of the challenge that we are facing. And then Laura will cover her experience in this project and how she's been using the collars this year. So as a note, we are using the Monil cattle collars. So it's a Norwegian brand. They're quite new on the market, and we got the collars last year. The first batch, we started using them last May. So we only have one season of experience, so we're still new and learning how to use them. Yeah, so Species on the Edge. So I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's a program, a 4-year program. It's a collaboration between 8 conservation organisations in Scotland, and we're working across coastal and island areas to protect 37 of the rarest and most vulnerable species in Scotland. And we're trying to build support for these and deliver habitat management for them. So it started in 23 and it's running until December this year, and it's funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So in Shetland, we have 7 species that we're targeting, and that includes the curlew, lapwing, redneck phalarope, and Shetland bumblebee, which are the ones that we're going to speak about today. So we're working with crofters across Shetland and other areas, work with land managers in their areas, and we're trying to do surveys and habitat monitoring, and then creation of habitats and advice and practical habitat delivery. And that's how the funding for the cattle collar has come about, and it has provided an opportunity to try them in Shetland, but also in the Outer Hebrides. They've been using them. So we'll start with the waders. So the ones that we're focusing on in Shetland are the curlew, lapwing, and the redneck phalarope. But we also indirectly work on other species that are closely related. So there are 5 species that often referred to as farmland waders. So the oyster catcher, snipe, redshank, so curlew, lapwing. And then in Shetland and to some extent in other parts of Scotland, but Shetland is a core area for them in the UK, the redneck phalarope. So all these species are associated with agricultural land. They're all long or relatively long-legged birds, and they feed in shallow water and muddy areas. They look for invertebrates like earthworms or leatherjacket and caterpillars. They have different bill length and adapted to different range of ground conditions and different prey, and that allows them to share similar habitats. And in Scotland, the reason why we're focusing on lapwing and curlew in particular is because their populations in Scotland and the UK more widely are declining. And in Scotland, in the last 30 years, both lapwing and curlew have lost over 60% of their breeding population. The redneck phalarope is slightly different, so it's at the ones breeding in Shetland are at the southern edge of their range, and most of the ones in Scotland are in Shetland, so we have a particular responsibility for looking after them. So the RSPB in Shetland does quite a lot of work to manage their habitats. So this is just a map showing the like breeding abundance of these waders. The red areas show where the highest densities of breeding birds are, and that's really to highlight that Scotland, and in particular the islands, are key hotspots for these birds. So that's why we are keen to work on them and manage habitats for them in our area. A little bit about wader ecology. So the waders are migratory birds, and they come back north for breeding in the early spring, and they lay a clutch of up to 4 eggs on the ground. That's a key aspect. So they're ground nesting birds. And when the chick hatch, they immediately leave the nest and start foraging, and they can move quite big distances to find suitable feeding areas. They're usually fledged by the end of June or mid-July, and there are slight variations in habitat preferences between the different species, but generally they're looking for wet ground. The main cause for their decline is the failure to raise chicks to fledging. So the breeding stage of their cycle is the one that we are trying to support, so they can raise chicks. And the issue is generally driven by the changes in land use and the intensification of agriculture that can reduce the quality of the habitat and the chance of success. So again, that's what we are working on, is trying to improve the conditions during the spring so they can raise chicks. But we will look at the habitats a bit more in detail. So I hope this works. So that's a little video that we filmed with a trail camera and shows a curlew on the nest. You saw and heard the sound. Yeah, that's just to show what it looks like for like life for a curlew in a field in the spring. And this one is a phalarope, so that's my colleague, who's site manager, who filmed that one. That's quite a rare opportunity. They're very difficult to see and very challenging habitats to get into. And that's so the phalaropes are quite a distinctive breeding ecology. So this is a male bird, and the male do the chick rearing. So the females just lay the eggs and then leave, and the male does the rest of the breeding. And then a little bit about bumblebees, which is the other group that we're looking at. So in Shetland, we've got 6 different species of bumblebees. In Scotland, there is another, well, there are other species, but one in particular that is of interest is the great yellow bumblebee, which is another one of the species that we are targeting through Species on the Edge. But in Shetland, we don't have it. We're focusing on the Shetland bumblebee, which is an endemic. It's endemic to Shetland and the Outer Hebrides. We call it the Shetland bumblebee, but I think they don't use that word in the Hebrides. It's also called the Mossgauder bumblebee. So the cycle for the bumblebee, so the queens hibernate and emerge in this early spring, and she will start foraging for nectar and pollen, and then she will build a nest and lay eggs, and those eggs will become the worker bees. And then at the end of these ones become the foragers, and then at the end of the summer, new queens and males will leave the nest, and once the queens are mated, they will find a place to hibernate, and the old colonies will die off. So only the queen will survive through the winter, and then the cycle starts again the following year. So basically, the key to managing for these bumblebees is to provide flowers that are rich in nectar throughout the summer. So we need a range of different species that flower at different times, so they have food to supply the nest throughout, like from early spring until late summer or early autumn. And habitat, so for waders, what we're looking for is abundant cover for the nests and the chick, a diverse sward structure, so that provides different conditions for the different species that have different preferences, and also for the different stages. So the nesting stage to the chick rearing, and then the adults feeding. They can nest on bare ground, so lapwing and oystercatchers are often lay egg on bare ground as well. So crops in the early spring can be good places for them to nest. They also need a high water table. They feed in wet ground, so they use their beaks to probe through the ground, so they need the soil to be soft. And muddy patches and small scrapes are good for providing insects for them to feed on, and for the chicks to easily find food. And the other thing is that healthy soil that provides good food sources like earthworms. So that's the reason why we're talking about that, is because that's kind of what the grazing will help support. And for bumblebees, so we're looking for species-rich grasslands. And again, it's about providing a range of different vegetation heights and different, like as many different flower species that that can flower at different time of the summer. And usually these sites are species nutrient poor, so the competition with the more vigorous grasses is limited. So cattle, which is really what we're here for. So grazing by cattle is really what we are interested in, and cattle can provide very good habitat condition for both waders and bumblebees. They create a variety of in the sward in terms of height and different species of plants that will benefit. And their eating, dunging, and trampling pattern create like microhabitats that invertebrates then can use, and that also create a diversity in the invertebrate populations. And these invertebrates then in turn support birds. And yeah, and also cattle can be better at grazing in rougher areas, and can deal with the like tougher vegetation. Yeah, and then the management of grazing. So we work in both wet habitats and then the more species-rich grasslands. some of the challenges that we face when we're dealing with these habitats and trying to manage them for conservation purposes, but also for livestock management in general. Fencing of wetlands and in Shetland and, well, other parts of Scotland, coastal sites are quite abundant and widespread, and fencing large stretches of coastline can be impractical. Another challenge is the remoteness of some sites. So the top photo is a phalarope site, and that's on the island of Fetlar, which is on the east side of Shetland, but it's a quite a difficult place to get to. And even within the island, it's not a place that we can just drive to. So having animals there can be quite challenging. We also need to consider the livestock welfare. So we want the cows to be in good condition and not risk being trapped or caught in on wet ground. So sometimes we have to just take them off so they don't get stuck. And then another issue that we have encountered is the access to these sites. So that's the second photo, and that's Laura's site. So public access, this is one of the nicest beach in Shetland, so it's quite popular with visitors. Local dog walkers, and that can create some issues with disturbance of livestock. And so when we're thinking about managing or improving the management of these habitats and considered cattle collars, these are a few reasons why we thought we should try it. So they can help in areas where, as I mentioned just now, where the physical fence is not practical. So a coastal stretch or a wet area that wouldn't be possible. They have allowed checking the animal location at all times, and we receive an alert when the cow is not moving or is moving unusually. There's more movement than usual. So that means there might be an issue. And it's allowing us as well to fence off some sensitive areas. So instead of using an electric fence, we can just map out some areas that we want to keep the cows out of. So something we haven't yet tried, but we will try this spring, is to map nesting areas. So instead of completely excluding livestock during the breeding season, which is through eggs, that's what we tend to do. But here we might be able to try being more targeted in the field, so just selecting the areas that are that have bird activity and leaving the cows to graze the rest of the field. And on the other end, we can fence off the areas that are dangerous for livestock. So for waders in particular, we're keen to create pools, and like one of the sites we're working on, last year there was a lot of work, digger work, to create pools and scrapes, but we want them to be, because they're new, we want them to be free of grazing or trampling for at least a couple of seasons for them to settle. So we created fence around them so the cows can still access the field, but they're not coming too close to the pools. So this is an example of that. So the map here shows that in blue, that's the areas that they have access to, the cows have access to, and then the white lines are the fences, and they can't get into those areas that are now pools. This is the first video, is the first day the cows had these 3 cows had collars on. So you can't hear the sound, but you can see the reaction to the first encounter with it. I'll try it again. The first encounter with the sound and the shock. And then the second video, that's the same cows in the same field, but a few weeks later, yeah, so that's the cow came into contact with the edge of the pool, which is fenced off, and just moved away without getting a shock because she's learned how to just move out. And yeah, just a few examples of the landscapes we're working on and the species we are trying to help. So the first one, that's Laura's field. She will tell you a bit more about it. But the second one, that's in Bresse on the east side of Shetland. And that's an area that, like a coastal area that was grazed by sheep, but it's an open, well, it's an open hill. So the cows were like couldn't yeah, it wasn't practical to put the cow in, but this summer they had this quite extensive area opened up. And the third photo is in Norwich in the north of Funst. So that's a dune, coastal dune area. And these three cows seem to be having a great time just on the beach. And that also allowed, well, this is also a popular area with visitors, and the cows and the people seem to be able to manage on the same area. And then a few plants that those cows are helping, and the nest of curlews. I'll now hand over to Laura to talk about her experience with the collars.
Thanks, Natalie. Hello, everyone. As Natalie said, my name is Laura Sinclair, and I'm here this evening to tell you about my experience with using these virtual fence collars. We use the Monal virtual fence collars, and as Natalie mentioned, they're from a Norwegian-based company, and the collars are solar charged with the option to manually charge them if there isn't enough sun. I've tried to include a full summary of our experience of using the collars, including some practical things we have learned along the way, the benefits and the negatives. But if anyone has any questions or wants to discuss anything further, happy to take questions at the end, or feel free to get in touch with me afterwards if you want to discuss further. By way of background, I'm based in the south mainland of Shetland, and we have a small herd of just under a dozen beef cattle, which are primarily Limousin crosses. You can just make them out in the background of that photo on the slide. We have quite a traditional system when it comes to our cattle, and that they come in for winter, which sometimes feels like it goes on forever. Sometimes it's 6 months, but hopefully that's not the case this year. And then they're put out onto grass for the summer, get fed in the back end before coming in for winter, and the cycle starts again. In the past, and I'm talking 25 plus years ago, we used to move our cows down to the sandier ground, to this field here, which is shown in the photo. They would go there for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, before we took them into the byre for winter. And the reason for this was because it was drier, less prone to poaching to the other fields, and they were just more comfortable there. There was a bit more shelter. I'm not really sure why we stopped doing this. It was a bit of a mission and team effort to get them all moved there. But on reflecting, I do think the main reason was the never-ending battle of having to constantly maintain and move the fence along the sand dunes, which continually moved and changed each winter. You can just see them there in the background of the photo as well, and Natalie had a picture of them. But the moving sand dunes and the constant fencing and lost fencing in the dunes has been the reason that we've not put cattle there in recent times. And on looking back over the last couple of decades, you can certainly see the lack of cattle has had an impact on the quality and variety of species grown in the field, which was up until last summer only grazed by sheep. Again, referring to the photo, but you can see there's a lot of this long spiky grass. In Shetland, we call it bent, but I don't know what anyone else calls it, but it's not that good and not that palatable. So it would be good to get some grass back there. And I always wanted to find a way to get the cows back there. And when Natalie suggested the collars, I was immediately on board. I'd had a few folk talk about them before, but I didn't know much about them. So we were really keen to find out more and to find out if it was going to be something that worked for us and could improve our croft. So next slide, Natalie, please. So in terms of learning how to use the collars, we found this pretty simple. There was a picture of the collars on a previous slide that Natalie had up, but essentially there's just one button on them, which is located on the upper side of the solar panel. And you just press that button once to turn it on and a green light flashes. And if you want to turn it off, you just hold the button in for a couple of seconds and a red light flashes. We did find that when they were brand new, they did take a few minutes to update. I know our ones were located in Norway for a pretty start, but once they got a signal and updated, they got located to Shetland. Each collar has a unique number and QR code on it, and all you need to do is scan that QR code to register it with the app. And then once it's on the app, you can change the name to the name of your cow. I don't know if anyone else names their cows, but we do. Or you can put the tag number in so you can keep tabs on them and see where they are. You then need to draw your field in the app. I did find this probably the fiddliest bit out of all, but like everything, the more you do it, the more you get the hang of it. I've included a screenshot on the slide from the app, and essentially all you need to do is reshape that square to fit your field and then save it. I haven't dedicated any more time in this talk to explain how the app works, but we have found it user-friendly, and Monal, the company who runs it, are always on hand to help. And again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, happy to discuss the app with anyone afterwards or answer any questions at the end of this talk. That's no problem. It was then time to get the collars on the cows, which I thought was the most exciting bit. And again, this was pretty straightforward, but you'll all know this, but to get them on, cows have to be pretty friendly to work with them or be able to be held or restrained in some way so you can get the collar on properly. We'd either just smooth the collar over the top of the cow's head and then adjust the tightness as necessary, or as I always call it, we take the cuddle approach, just undo it, hand over, flip it under the chin, just like you do with putting a necklace or something on. So quite straightforward. Next slide, Natalie. Thank you. And then just moving on to some practical pointers we've picked up along the way while using the collars that I thought might be useful to share with you all. First of all, and just really following on from the last slide, it's important to get the collar on correctly. So you need to check the orientation. The solar panel needs to sit on top of the neck with the numbers facing towards the cow's head, and then the buckle where it ties under needs to tie under their chin. And then you need to adjust the collar so it's not too tight or not too loose. It has to be just right. It should be able to rotate freely around the cow's neck, and you should be able to fit your hand under the solar panel. I think this is the bit we probably struggled with the most initially, but we learned along the way that as long as the collar is tight enough not to fall off over the cow's head, it's probably better because it allows more comfort for the cow and it allows for growing room. And the buckle at the bottom is quite a heavy weight, so it should always correct itself if for any reason the collar seems to go a bit wonky and it goes sideways or upside down. Often we would check our Kai and the collar would be upside down, but it was just as soon rectified by the cow moving and gravity doing its thing. But as long as the cow wasn't too tight, because obviously if it was too tight, there wouldn't be enough way for it to turn back up around again. And also something I didn't think about to begin with was that it's quite important to consider the breed of cow. Our purer limousines didn't have as thick a coat of hair, so initially some of the collars did wear down the hair at their neck, but thankfully we monitored them and noticed it, so we loosened it and just kept an eye on it thereafter, and it seemed just to work itself out and worked fine. Our heifers have more shorthorn in them, so they were a bit hairier, so this wasn't an issue, but we did have to take account growing room for them, and their collars did need adjusted and loosened as they grew. It was quite interesting seeing how much they'd grown when we compared what notch they were on at the very beginning when they went out to when they came in. Now, the second point will depend on your circumstances, and it's probably common sense, but I just thought I would mention it. But if you're putting your collars on your cattle and you're putting your cattle out for the very first time, just allow them time to settle down before activating the virtual fence. We all know cows can get a bit excited when they see grass and sun for the first time, and the last thing you want is them getting spooked by beeps or shocks. So I would just recommend that once they've acclimatized to being outside, then you can add them to the field and add the virtual fence. I would also recommend that you start off in a practice field. And by this, I mean a field that is already adequately fenced. This just helps both you and your cattle become familiar with the collars in a controlled environment. We had our cows in a practice field for a good number of months, and it was a great way just to get the hang of using the app, how things worked, and to get the Kai used with the collars, so that when we did move them down to the sandy area near the dunes, they knew exactly what to do when the beep came up, just like you saw in Natalie's videos earlier. Another practical point that's useful, I think, if possible, have a spare collar in case one of them stops working or a battery goes flat. We didn't have any issues with this until the middle of winter, where a spare collar would have come in handy. But I'll touch on this later on. And on this note, and again, at the risk of stating the obvious, make sure the collars are fully charged before you put them on the cows. Another practical point is that the app does need updated if you're planning to remove collars or move your cattle to another field. The last thing you want is you or your cows getting unintended shocks from them. I don't think anyone would want that. Where are we? Yeah, next point, cattle handling equipment. I think it's important to think about how you're going to monitor and alter or remove the collars. I appreciate this might not be an issue if you've got really tame cattle and you can walk up to them and do anything with them, but if you're like us, there'll always be that one sassy cow or awkward cow who just doesn't want you to go near them. So I think it's quite a good idea if you have a crush or even cattle pens or something to make the process easier, less stressful for both you and the cows, and at the end of the day, just to make it safer. And then finally, just one thing I wanted to mention was that there are a couple of other crofters in Shetland using the collars, as Natalie mentioned, as part of the Species on the Edge programme. And speaking with them and hearing their experiences has been invaluable. Just as a general point, I think we as an industry need to do more of this and talk and share knowledge and share experiences. And as I said at the beginning, happy to talk about this further if anyone's interested. Next slide, please, Natalie. Yep, so moving on to the positives. I feel there's been lots of positives, and when I sat down to write this presentation earlier on, I almost had a mind blank, so I've probably missed out a couple, but I jotted down as many as I thought. So most obvious, it takes the pressure off cattle proofing fences. I know for us, a lot of our fences are stock proof in terms of sheep, but they probably need additional measures for cattle. So the collars do take the pressure off that. And as Natalie mentioned, it opens up new areas for grazing that weren't possible before. So for us, with our land down at the dunes, due to not having cattle there and the dunes constantly moving, it wasn't feasible for us to have cattle there, but now it is, which is great. And for us as well, it took the pressure off us getting the cows in for winter. As I said, where they are, it's nice and dry, it's sandy, low risk of poaching, it's clean for them, and the dunes provided plenty of shelter. And this meant we could actually keep this batch of cows that you see the photo of, we could keep them out till the middle of January this year, which was brilliant, and 2 to 3 months longer than we would normally have kept them out. And I should have said, when we did take them in and we compared them with our other cattle, they were in similar, if not maybe even a bit better condition, but maybe that had to do with the ad lib silage they were getting while they were out. Another aspect that I found quite interesting was that we were able to monitor our cattle from afar. So on the slide, I've included a screenshot from the app, and you can see, you might need to zoom in, there's green dots. So there should be 4 in total. There's 3 huddled together at the top and 1 down at the bottom. So this green dot at the bottom was a cow that had gone off on her own. And this is, we knew our cows were due to calve, so that immediately informed us, oh, something's up, she's maybe thinking about calving. So we were able to discreetly go and check her without disturbing her or without disturbing the other cattle, and just leave her to it and keep an eye on her, which was really useful. You also get notifications if a cow is more active than normal, and that tended to suggest that a cow was bulling, which again, useful information for managing the cows. Another benefit is that you can control where the cows go. So it allows you to concentrate grazing, it allows you to zone off areas. For example, in this sandy field where we had the cows, we also grew a bumblebird mix as part of the species on the edge scheme. You can see that in the other photo, the yellow and blue flowers. This area had no physical fence around it, but we were able to protect it with the mono fence, and the cows never encroached on it. And as Natalie also said, it's useful for zoning off danger areas for cattle and nest sites. Practically, we also found it useful when we started feeding the cows with silage, because I could lock them in one end of the field, and then my dad could go to the other end of the field with the tractor and the bale and get that all sorted. And once it was ready, I could release the cows and they could go get their silage. So that was a much easier way to do that. Next slide, Natalie. And as with everything, you encounter a few issues, but hopefully ones that aren't too bad and we can find solutions for. First of all, the map where we had to create our field wasn't quite accurate, and often find it might be 5 to 10 meters out either way. So sometimes you couldn't do it from the comfort of your sitting room, but a way around it is that you would just have to go out with the phone, the app, and physically walk the field, and it would record the field that way. But it did mean it had to be checked regularly in case they'd updated the map and things had shifted a bit. Probably our biggest disadvantage was the Shetland weather, or the Shetland winter, I should say. As I said, these collars are charged by solar panels, and we had such a great summer, didn't need to touch them at all. But as soon as Storm Amy hit, I think that was October time, it was sort of time with the start of our winter darkness up here. The collars took a big hit, and there wasn't enough sun to charge them again. We also had a few misty spells unseasonally, I know, in November. You can see in the top photo, so that meant they couldn't charge. We did have some sunny days, so I thought I'd include a photo of that. It's not all doom and gloom and darkness up here, but in the winter the sun just doesn't get high enough, and it just wasn't strong enough to charge them. So we did have to take collars off and manually charge them, and that's why we realised it was so important to have a spare collar and adequate handling facilities so that this can be done easily, quickly and safely. Another issue I did note as a negative, I don't know if it's a negative, but it's something to note, just about educating others. For us in our local area in Shetland, this was a relatively new thing. And I could just hear a lot of folks saying, what's Laura done now? Last year she planted a rig of weeds for twite, and this year she's putting kye in a field with no fences. Oh, lugs were burning, I think. But I guess it's just the challenge of putting yourself out there and taking the risk, which thankfully has paid off. A few crofters, some neighbouring farm crofters have come on board, and they've asked to be a part of it, which is really good. And it's also as well about educating the general public. As Natalie said, our field there is near quite a popular beach. And it's just making the public aware that even though there might not be a fence, or there might be a poor fence there, it doesn't mean that they can go walking in there, or their dog can go walking in there. And equally, it doesn't mean that the cows can come out. We were supported by Natalie and our colleagues at RSPB with this, and they put up signs and did promotions to get the word out there. And they also provided a poster with a QR code, which anyone could scan, and it would give you a picture of where the virtual fence was, so everyone could see where the cows couldn't go. So that was a good thing. And then next slide. Yeah, just I guess looking to the future. I think all in all, this has been a positive experience for us, and I hope that we can prove it delivers results on a biodiversity front as well. It's given us a real boost, Almer Croft. I I don't think I'm alone in saying that in recent times it's felt like everything is against you when it comes to having cows on a small scale. And sometimes you do find yourself, why are you doing this? But the collars have opened up a lot of doors and presented options that weren't available before, and things we'll have to think about. I mean, for example, do we change breed to a slightly hardier breed and maybe outwinter some cattle? Would that take the pressure off? Would that deliver? I don't know. Also hope that the quality of the grass in this field and the soil will improve. Watch this space. And as I touched on before, it's definitely brought crofters together, but it's also resulted in good working relationships with the likes of RSPB. And Natalie and her colleagues were really lucky that our Shetland RSPB want to work with crofters. And the success of the Species on the Edge programme is a great example of that. And with everything that's happening, policy changes, etc., I think it's really good if we can have people like them on our side and sing from the same hymn sheet. And last point, I just feel this is a great example of how crofting doesn't have to change to support nature. I've been able to graze my cattle normally, and it's supporting the surrounding biodiversity. And I think we need to shout about this type of thing more. Given that past, present, and future government schemes fail to recognise that, and they always want us to do more, to give up more, give up land or do more. But this is just a prime example that we're delivering real results on the ground, and I think that should be prioritised over ticking boxes and filling out forms and the like. But that's maybe a rant for another day. And on that note, I will pass you back.
These are my contact details. If anyone wants to get in touch, please do. And if you want to get in touch with Laura, just I can pass on any question to Laura.
That was fascinating. We're going to move on now before any questions to Donald McSween or Sweeney, who is finally managed to log in to us from Lewis. I'll let him explain his technical issues, but he assures me his enthusiasm will carry us through where technology has let us down.
Yeah, just an absolute nightmare with technology today. But hopefully, my PowerPoint has died, so I won't let me do it. But I'm going to try and share my screen, and I'll just have a few pictures. And it's probably a good thing. We'll put a positive spin on it, because I think there'll be a lot of repetition in what we've just seen, because there's a lot of similarities between the two systems. I use the no fence system. So let us just see what is. I'm just going to share, and hopefully, and my most sincere apologies for cutting out half of Orkney and all of Shetland, but you know, so be it at this time. So for those of you who don't know where Lewis is, that is Lewis there, and I where the blue dot is, and I am right up at the top in Ness. And yeah, it's the center of the universe rather than being remote. And then when you look at the north end of Lewis, this is roughly that red area is roughly the common grazings that we have access to. We have a massive amount of common grazings. I think that's like 15,000 hectares or something along those lines. So it's a really big area, and it's vastly underused. It's not. There's so much more potential there. So vastly underused, and it's just not really benefiting anybody in that state, because if it's undergrazed, it's not benefiting livestock. If it's undergrazed, it's not benefiting the wildlife that are there. The only animals that are benefiting from it are the deer, whose numbers are going through the roof because they've just got more and more grazing to themselves. So I have had my cattle out on the common grazings. This is just North Dell here in the summer, and I got Highlanders. It's 9 years now since I got Highland cattle, and I was having issues with them every now and again appearing where they shouldn't be. And initially there was another, I can't remember what the other collar system that was like a Spanish company or something. I used them, but it wasn't. It would give notifications like half an hour later and things like that, and it wasn't very good. And then I saw the no fence collars a few, after that. And you could just see how vast the common grazing is there. They could walk all the way to Stornoway, which is like 15 miles. There's no fence. There'll be no fences between where they are there and they're about a mile away from or half a mile away anyway from the houses they are, and they could just walk for miles and miles and miles. And then when I saw the no fence collars, it was like, okay, this has a lot of potential. So I applied for a CAGS grant, and I was the first person to make the application for CAGS. And at that time, I had 5 head of cattle, and so I got the collars, and I have some of the collars here as well. So I know we were explaining the other system before, and this one I'll demonstrate it on myself. So it just hangs around the neck like that, and they do have this the rubber band here, but then the electric pulse is delivered via these chains. So got them on the cattle, and as Laura was explaining, you do have to be a bit careful the first time you put them on, because they will turn into bucking broncos when they go on first, because they don't know what's around their necks. But they settle within a few minutes. And yeah, have a training field to train them up on with fences. And so what I did was I had a field and had set the boundary on the app, the app on the phone, and that followed the fence boundary on 3 sides, and then I just on a random place I did one of the sides, which is through the middle of the field. So I had them in by at this time, and after about 5 or 6 days, when I was going out and feeding them every morning, and then one day I just went out and all the cows were in a line. Just it was just this. There was nothing there, and all the cows are standing in a line. And it's like, okay, now it's worked. So I found that it takes about a week for the cows to be trained up on it. The adult cattle, anyway. And after that, it's been fantastic, because when I go back to my pictures, when you have cattle, sometimes they appear in places that they're not supposed to be. And this is one of them. Now, the innocent stories when these happen when these incidents happen are sometimes that the cows just get out. But unfortunately, that was not what happened here. There was a bit of maliciousness here. And you have incidents like this when people just leave gates open. Whether or not that's on purpose, I don't know. But that gate has been replaced now anyway. But these things are happening, and if I wasn't around, it would fall on my parents to put the cattle back in. And the other thing, this was in the middle. I remember this was during the 2018 World Cup, and 11. I was watching a game or something, and this was at 10-11 o'clock on a Sunday night. And then I get a text saying the cows are out, so I'm having to go out and put them back in. And it was always 6 in the morning or 11 at night, which is just an absolute nightmare. But since I've got the collars, that has stopped this happening completely. It just doesn't happen. They don't escape like that. But again, as Laura was saying, when it comes down to the education side of things, when I have my cattle in different places, it's usually, I'm sure that everybody has a similar issue. It's usually on a Facebook group somewhere saying, oh, there's cows here, there, or everywhere. And it's like, no, the cows are supposed to be there. So it's quite frustrating sometimes that people don't pay attention to these things. But I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are frustrated by Facebook groups anyway. But it is very, very frustrating when people are, when you have gone to the effort of trying to inform people and educate people, but it's just shared for dramatic effect, I think, and rather than any good intentions. But I think that there's, I mean, we're talking a lot about we've heard a lot there about the biodiversity benefits, and I think that has been evident from what we've been doing here as well. When I got the collars in October 2021, that was the first time I got them, and like I said, had 5 head of cattle. Within a week, I'd bought another cow because I could see how effective the collars were going to be. I used to work when I was younger for the RSPB as Lewis and Harris Corncrake officer, so I knew a lot of the stuff that was going on. And I got in touch with the local RSPB officer and I said, I've got these collars. Do you reckon, there's opportunities to work together? And they've been doing, we're in a Corncrake SPA here, so there's lots of crofts that are otherwise not used. They're vastly underused, and they've been neglected to all extent and purposes. And so they were then having to use like a quad going in and mowing the grass with a quad, because they had no way of putting sheep, for example, or cattle on these crofts because the fences were falling down. So there was all this underutilized land. And then when I had the collars and the collars were working, the opportunities kind of exploded. And I'm just going to see let's see where my next picture is. Yeah, so here are some of the cattle with the collars on. These were some of the bullocks down at Loch Giapavat, which is a local nature reserve. And again, when they go down here, I often get phone calls saying, your cows in the other loch, the animals have got bogged down here before and drowned. And yes, there are areas where these things happen. But having walked the land, in the app, I can then change the boundary or set up exclusion zones for where it is actually dangerous to keep the cattle out of there. And that has worked really, really well. Been down there from 2021, and they go down when that opens up on the 1st of August. So most years I'm just waiting for August to arrive and get the cattle out there. And it's been really good, and you could see the difference in the crofts as well. I wish I'd taken a photo. There was one day I went down and one of the crofts that I've been grazing regularly for the RSPB. I remember driving past it one August, and the colours that were there were spectacular. And this one was right next to the road, and a croft that people pass on numerous occasions. And it was just amazing to see. So here is the important stuff as well, though, because I've got Highlanders or Highland cross cattle, and mine are out 24/7. They never come inside. So this is how the finances have worked over the last few years. And I think when you're trying to tell people about the benefits of the collars, and it's like, this is really good for biodiversity, this is really good for for wildlife, and this is a good thing because it'll make you feel warm and cuddly. That's all right. It's the same thing as saying to people, use renewable heating sources for your homes because it helps the environment. Okay, when you explain to people that if you use these things in your home and it can make your energy costs much cheaper, then people start listening. And I think this is when I can show how effective the collars have been. So you can see the first year, my feed costs over £1,100 for the 6 cattle, and then 24-25 when I had 26 head of cattle. This isn't a feed cost per cow or anything like that. That's the total, and that's mainly lick buckets and some feed to keep them sweet and to entice them into the handling facilities. I know handling facilities are very, very important. I'll come back onto that. And then the collar costs they are. I'm sure I think when I did this table, I remembered exactly what each of these things meant. But I think what I was doing there was after the running costs per year for the collars. So that would be like the 360 in year one would be the subscription cost, subscription of 40 quid per collar per annum. It's five or £6 a month, depending on how many months you use it throughout the year, and but it's capped at £40 for the year, so you don't spend more than £40 per collar. And then the 1,560, that is obviously reflects the increased number of collar subscriptions, and also the collars have a 4-year warranty, so I'm spreading the cost of the remaining balance of, obviously the CAGs cost. So I think £300 per collar, and getting 60% grant for that. So the remaining 120 odd pounds there, plus the subscription costs. But the £120 spread over, so 30 quid plus the 40 quid, so £70 a year in running costs, for example, plus the feeding costs. I was working out, like, just, you can see they are £2,560 for the 26 head of cattle, so just under £100 a head for the winter. And when I compare that to the £200 a head, or something like that I had in the first year of doing it, then I think it's a really significant change. It's made things a lot easier for me. It's a lot more reassuring if I'm away doing something else. The cattle, I can check them remotely. When the department bull, which left this morning after being here for a while, when the bull is here, when I've got the bull, I put a collar on him, and he's usually grazing out these fields with my cattle as well. And so it means that I know where the cattle are. I know where the bull is. I'm getting a notification if anything happens. Now the bull, the same way as a normal wire fence, is just a guideline for a bull. That's not guaranteed to keep a bull in place, but at least with the collar, I know if anything is going wrong. The no fence system also gives notifications if there's no movement detected. So sometimes I'll have a notification saying no movement detected. Now that happens after 4 hours. More often than not, if it's no movement detected and I go out, they've caught their collar on something. The collars do have kind of fail points here, so if they catch on something, if they've been scratching themselves or something and caught the collar on a fence or something out in the moor, this will break, and I've got a pile of these that can replace. Sometimes the rubber part will break, but the notifications are there to let you know if anything, just in case anything is sick, or if anything is dead or stuck in a bog or anything like that. That hasn't happened to me yet, to touch wood. The only other time I get these notifications is if we've got particularly windy weather. If there is windy weather, the cattle kind of hunker down for a bit longer, and you'll get the notifications then. The first couple of times, I think I went out and checked that they were okay. But now, if it's particularly windy and I'm getting these notifications, I'll wait until the weather's a little bit better and then see what happens. When they're out in the moor, previously I had a huge area to cover to try and feed them if I was going to go and check them or feed them. So I would have 3 peat roads, 3 access roads out in the moor that I would have that I could go and see if I could find them. So I was spending a lot of time back and forth on the quad or the pickup trying to find the cattle. And more often than not, they were on the first road that I checked, but I just couldn't see them. And then I've gone and checked 2 other places, and then they've appeared in the first place. So it cuts out a lot of the time spent looking for them. I know that they're okay. What I've done sometimes in the summer is when they're further out in the moor, I just use the drone to do a visual check on them. If they're 1.5 miles out in the moor or something, I can just do a quick visual check with the drone, and it works really well. When it comes down to batteries, now the batteries come separate. I've now got maybe 30 collars, and I've probably got at least 40 batteries because I've always got spares. So you just put them in. I don't know if you can hear the beep there. So that's just letting you know that it's working, and it's you can get it out like that. The problem is when it's cold in the winter. That's a lot harder to get out than it is in the summer months. And batteries can be an issue in the winter. Typically from April till about October, don't have to touch them. The collars have solar panels in them, and that keeps it topped up most of the time. So there's a combination of in the summer, if they're out on the common grazing, it's brighter, and also they're further away from the boundaries. So when they're closer to the boundaries, the collars communicate with the satellites more regularly. So because they're in near constant communication, when they're in near constant communication, that drains the battery a lot more. When they're miles away from the boundaries, it can relax a little bit. So in the winter months, when we're doing all the grazing on all the small crofts here, the crofts here are about 25 meters wide. Some of the crofts that I've grazed are narrower than that as well. So that's an almost constant contact with the satellite, and that can drain the batteries even quicker. So you can end up with the batteries. I typically end up changing the batteries maybe every 6 weeks in the summer. I'll usually work it so that I've got the handling facilities set up, and then if we're walking from one croft to another croft, we'll nip into the handling facilities and change the collars, and that it seems to work really well. Yeah, and you also can't rely entirely on the map that's in the app as well, because I had a problem with one croft that had a road adjacent to it, and had the boundary set up one year, and it does have a 3-meter margin of error. So sometimes they can drift a little bit. So I quite often, particularly if it's a new fence there or a road or something like that, I'll bring it in a little bit. But one year I was having all these problems and I couldn't figure it out. And I went back to no fence and I was like, what is the script here? They keep ending up over the boundary that I've put in place. And it turns out that they use Google Maps, and Google Maps had updated and moved everything ever so slightly. So now when I go back, I can't rely entirely on the boundary that I set a year earlier. I have to just double check that everything is there in place now. If it's a big field, you're not going to notice that. It's only when it's a really, really narrow crofts that issue arises, and then it can lead to problems. But now that I know that, then it does make things a bit smoother. So we were talking about handling facilities, and hopefully the next picture is here. If you don't have handling facilities and you've got Highland cows and you think you're a bit of a smart aleck, then sometimes you can end up horning your thigh. So this is what happened to me. I I've got one cow who, well, quite a few of my cattle, I do change their collars. I'll take the collar off, put a new battery in. I'll do that on the hoof without putting them in the crush or in a pen. But this is definitely a case of do as I say, not as I do, because the cow that stabbed me, and that did need a few stitches. This is her, and I call these my cow horn dildos that I fitted after that. I didn't know such a thing existed, but I saw them online, and they lasted about 10 seconds before she threw them off her. But that cow has been renamed Stabby, and yeah, we've got a very healthy respect for each other. She's hospitalized me twice. So there was that one when she stabbed me, and before that she'd caught me across the abdomen, and I had to go and make sure that to go to A&E, as there was a concern that she may have ruptured my spleen. So she's definitely to be respected, and I think that's a very good example of why you should not try and do these things without proper handling facilities. I have, I do it quite often with just a pen, maybe 4 hurdles. If you've only got a few animals and you don't have a crush, for example, or if you're moving them around different places, I'm quite quick at doing it now with just 4 hurdles. I think the only other incident I've had was trying to change the collar on a calf last year, and the calf ran across in front of a cow, and the cow lifted her head up, and her horn caught me in the nose, and I don't think it was broken, but there was a lot of blood anyway. So you do have to be very careful about these things. And yeah, plenty spare batteries and spare collars as well, because if you are penning the cattle and something, and you might have a dodgy collar, sometimes they'll get a bang. Sometimes it might not be charging properly. In my experience, no fence have been great at either repairing them. If it's a software issue, they will repair it remotely. If it's any other issue and it's still under warranty, a replacement is sent out, but that can take up to a week. So I've always got spare collars on hand because I rely on them so much. And if I don't have a collar for a cow, then I'm in a tricky position. So always having a spare collar or two, I think, is a very important thing to have. And yeah, and the batteries as well. And I've got 4 chargers now. So if in the winter I'll be a couple of days. I'll be day one. I'll do half of them, recharge the batteries that come off them, charge them, and then I'll do the other half and just keep them topped up like that. Whichever the lowest, say if I've got 10 spare batteries and I'm moving all the cattle, the lowest 10 percentages of battery power will be replaced. And I'm just talking to you guys right now, and I can just go on the app, and it's very, very similar to the layout that we saw Laura showing, with just the boundaries. And the one thing that maybe is a little bit different with no fence is it's a bit of a heat map. So you see this in football quite often as well. At half time they'll be showing green areas, and then we get amber and red where the cattle are spend most of their time. So you can see if a cow has been in the same position for a while. And in the app as well, you can go and you can look at individual animals, and you can see how long they've been in a particular place for, where they've moved in the last 24, 48 hours or the past week. These things are quite useful. Again, Laura was given an example of a cow off on her own, and that would, at calving time, that's one thing that I always keep an eye out for. rather than having to get up out of bed all the time and go and check them. When a cow is off on her own, then it's like, okay, let's go see what's happening here. So I think there's several ways in which it has in which it's reduced the man hours that are required, and that has been really useful. That's one thing. So you could say it's reducing man hours, it's reducing fuel consumption, and it's definitely a vast reduction in feed costs. These are the kind of like the obvious benefits, and then there's the wider benefits as well in terms of the increases seen in the flowers that are growing on lots of these crofts. And it's putting the way that we've been doing it, it's put a lot of underutilized land back into use. So that's benefiting the cattle who are on fresh-ish grazing all year round. It's benefiting biodiversity, the wildlife. It's benefiting me and my bank balance. It's benefiting the crofters who are no longer, strictly speaking, neglecting the croft that they're using. So it is win-win-win. And it sometimes it reaches a stage where, yeah, I'm making savings and that is benefiting me. But I wonder if it's going to reach the stage where people will be paying people to it probably happens in other places, I don't know, but I could imagine a position that if somebody's getting significant sums of money for carrying out conservation activities on their land, but they don't have livestock, then you could be in a position where they could hire in cattle or sheep, and then on sheep. I know we're mainly focusing on this is all about cattle collars, but no offense, also do a sheep or a goat one, and that's much smaller when you compare it to the cattle one. I think the system that again they're a Norwegian company and these are designed to be used in the summer. And that's all right in the summer once the sheep are freshly shorn. But in my experiences, I don't rely on this for sheep. It doesn't really work for them, particularly in the winter. Once they've got a bit of wool growing, that's providing insulation, and it doesn't really work. I mean, the one thing it does is it lets me know where if I put it on a troublemaker, it lets me know where she is. But yeah, it works the same kind of way. The other thing with the sheep was, I mean, I'm in the seagull management scheme, and I have suggested to Nature Scott that maybe look at putting collars on all the sheep that are when they're out in the common grazing, and then seeing if that provides any additional data when it comes to lambs that disappear and things like that. So yeah, the collars are there. I don't. They're there for the sheep. I know this isn't about them, but I got 5 as an experiment. Again, applying via CAGs for it, but I haven't got any more. I've had them for 3 or 4 years now, and I don't use them anymore because I don't trust the sheep. So, but yeah, but when it comes to the cattle, it's been absolutely fantastic. It's made things a lot easier for me and a lot more. Yeah, there's financial benefits to it. I think that's the fairest way of putting it. Because the way I see it is, when you're selling cattle in the auction ring, you've got very little control over what you get for them. The one thing that you can control is your input costs. And if I can vastly reduce my input costs, even if I keep beasts a little bit longer. So I sold some bullocks in the last year that were 4 years old. They'd done 4 winters. So they cost me around about £400 for that. And I know some people who might put £400 into an animal for 1 winter, if they're just pouring feed into them. So I think when you break things down like that, then it does seem to make a bit more sense. That is me, and I hopefully I've winged it enough and got through that all right.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know whether anyone has any questions. We don't have a huge amount of time left. There's lots and lots of information there, lots of anecdotal information and practical information. I actually had a wee question. You mentioned, Sweeney mentioned CAGs there. Natalie, are there other schemes that you can get the colours through other than CAGs? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I don't think Eggs is there yet in terms of capital payments. I don't think that's eligible yet. Hopefully that will change, but not at the moment.
They were available on the Future Farming Investment Scheme. Is that what, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they were available there. But I'm not sure if are crofters able to access them with that, because we're able to access them via CAGs. I don't know, but they were definitely on the list.
I've just signed up and got some through the local bumblebee support scheme.
So is that species on the edge? So
don't know. Sorry, the bump hasn't come through yet. I'm getting the bump next week and the colours the week after. So yeah.
Which area are you in?
Oh, I'm next door to Sweeney for my sins.
Yeah, so
yeah. If we shout out the window, we might hear each other.
Yeah, so I think it probably is a species on the edge as well. So the Bumblebee Conservation Club. Is it no fence ones?
Again, I'm not really sure yet. As I say, the bump is coming next week, and I spoke to her this morning, so it's all a bit brand new. I've been looking at them as a possibility for years. I've heard Sweeney's speech a couple of times, and yeah, I'm hoping to winter out. So I run Lings. So the next time we have this conversation, I'll have more information.
That's great. Yeah, I think in the Western Isles, I think the Species on the Edge fund it, don't they?
But and it's the Bumblebee Conservation Trust doing the lead part. So yeah.
Sadly, not everywhere though. That's
and it is so the project is ending at the end of 26, so that's the last year to get involved.
You've still got your hand up, Ian. Is that just?
No, I was just going to say I'm based down at Balmacara in Loch Alsh, and I work for NTS there. I manage the estate here for NTS, and we've had 6 Shetland cows for 2.5 years now, and we're using the no fence collars for them purely for conservation grazing. So we're not breeding the cows or anything; they're just grazing habitats for us. And like Donald said, they've been fantastic, actually. Just complete ground. Really changed the game for us. We've got areas that haven't been grazed for over 30 years are now able to be grazed, and it's going to take time to bring them back into better condition. But even within the areas that we've been managing in different ways, we're beginning to see change already. We've got on the estate here, mostly it's under crofting tenure, but there's about a quarter of it's in hand with ourselves. And one of the crofters who over in Plockton, he's got something like 51 cows now. His fuming's about 11, but he's got the rest are all in other people's ground, dotted about from Slate to Loch Carron and all over the place, just redundant ground that no one's been using for years. And he's lending them out to new crofters. He's lending them cows with a cow with a calf, and saying, "There you are, you run that on your croft," and he gets the cow back and the slightly grown up calf, and they've been able to try it out, and learn what it's like to be a new crofter with cows, and so it's a good learning experience. It's been really a great success. We've had a few problems with sudden failure. We've had a couple of our collars have just suddenly stopped working, which can be quite difficult. It's always at night. It's always in the dark, and so one, we couldn't get the cows in. We tried getting them in to a handling facility because they were in an area where there wasn't one, and it was a real difficulty getting them in. They just would not come in, and we got some of them in, but the one, of course, didn't have the collar working, wouldn't come in, and so she was running around for a while without, and she was fine because she just stayed with the others, but eventually she found a way out, and we just had to move them. But it can be a problem. And in the winter with the colder weather, the battery life definitely isn't as long. And I think it's important to note that I think after a few years, battery life does dwindle. They don't stay charged for as long. We can see that after 2.5 years or 2 years or so of using them, that they're definitely not holding their charge as long. And some of them are worse than others. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. But as Donald said, No Fence have been fantastic whenever we've had an issue. You know, they're very, very quick to respond. So yeah, the only other thing, the reason I was going to stick my hand up actually was I think that the forestry grant scheme will accept No Fence collars. So if you're doing like wood pasture, grazed woodlands, I think they will allow that as an alternative to fencing, physical fencing. We're looking at doing that here with some of our woodlands. And getting cows back in and out of woodlands. And I think in areas like that, that's an area that they really do offer a lot of potential, because, you know, hammer and bracken areas and getting them in and out and leaving areas fallow to recover and such. I think there's a real opportunity there. So we're looking forward to try and get that moving a bit, and hoping to work with some of the crofters on the estate to encourage kind of more proactive management of the woodlands on the grazings. Rather than it just being completely random. And we're seeing a downturn in the amount of grazings being used actually here, just in the last 5-10 years. People are using other people's redundant or empty, unused crofts instead of sticking the animals on the hill, which is not beneficial, I don't think. So it's a problem. We're seeing the deer numbers going up as well as a result. So yeah, bit of a problem. So anyway, that's just my contribution from Balmacana.
Just on the when you were saying that about the batteries after a few years, I think the batteries themselves are one thing. The other thing that I've seen is because the collars are hanging under their necks and they do have a solar panel on them, the solar panel can get a bit of a bashing as well. So you end up with it maybe being, you know, having blisters on it if they've scratched, you know, it'll just be wear and tear, and you know, sometimes it's just stones or whatever. And like the cow and the calf thing there as well, calves or younger animals, because again, Highlanders, so got some Highlanders born in February, March last year. The rubber band is very long on the back of their necks, so it's very little of the chain that's actually able to touch their necks, and then they're very hairy. So it's a bit more hit and miss with the young Highlanders anyway.
Well, the crofter in Plockton I was talking about, he's actually got some sheep collars, I should say, and he's been using them on the calves, and he's with an occasional bit of baling twine to adjust things where necessary and different things, but he doesn't use them. He doesn't allocate them to pasture. He just uses them so he can tell where they are, and he can see if they've separated from their mum or whatever. And he's found that works quite well for the calves because they're smaller. But the other thing that you mentioned was the batteries, getting the batteries out. It's a bloody nightmare in the field. It's just that when they get clarted up and stuff, you kind of, what was it? There was someone was saying a welding clamp, is it? I think they were saying that was the best thing they'd found for getting a grip of, because there's 2 little buttons you have to press in and then pull it out. But they get clarted up. Yeah, they get clarted up with muck and all sorts, and getting them squeezed in, it's really difficult if they're not in a crush. And we find it easy. You just have to take the collar off, and then we've quite often just swapped the collars over and brought them home, cleaned it all up, and that was the only way we could get the battery out. So I think No Fence are on the case though of trying to develop some kind of tool that will make it easier. So hopefully that will make a difference.
I made that suggestion to them the first winter that I had them, because obviously they use them mainly as a for summer grazing. That's what they were designed for. So, but in the winter, particularly if it's cold and
No,
it's a nightmare.
they're designed so they don't fall out, obviously, but it's it's hard work getting them out.
Laura, can I ask about the monil collars? Because you said they have solar panels on the back of the neck. So, and then do they have a battery as well, or do you like plug them in to charge them? How do they
Just plug them
work?
in to charge them. So, yeah, Natalie's holding it up there. So that's the solar panel you can see in the batteries contained in there. And if you need to charge them, there's just like a little, it's almost like a big Fitbit charger you hook them into for charging. You don't need to take any bits apart. So don't have that issue with getting batteries in and out with them. Sometimes we did find one of them did get a bit clogged up and dirty there near the end of winter, just with sand and stuff. You had to wipe the little ports a little bit, but nothing major. And then Natalie's holding up the buckle or the weight that goes under their chin. So I guess these ones are kind of the opposite way around of the no fence ones.
That's interesting. And how often, I can't remember how often you said you have to charge them in the winter. I know in the winter you need to charge them
in
up.
the winter, because the weather was particularly bad, and it was a good point Donald made about if they're nearer the boundary, that takes a toll on the battery. So we were probably charging our ones. We could almost stretch them a fortnight, but it depended on the weather. But when the weather was so bad, the cattle were going to the shelters, and obviously the shelters are at the edges of the fields, so that was triggering the uses of the battery quite a bit.
So then is that why you need a spare one so you can be charging one?
Because initially we didn't have a spare, so me and my dad were like, well, how are we going to do this? But because they were trained, we got away with leaving the cow just with the halter on in the field for the couple of hours that we took it back to the house to charge it and then put it back on, which worked, but we knew it wasn't ideal. So Natalie managed to get us a spare one, and that was a game changer for us, because it didn't mean you had to spend your whole day on cow collars. You could just swap it and charge one overnight ready for the next day or the next week.
Yeah, well, that's good. Thank you. Ian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say batteries. I mean, no offense, one of the things they have is they've got different settings you can put it on. You can put it on eco mode, and it doesn't report as frequently to the app. But for most purposes, it's perfectly adequate. And I run mine on the eco mode all the time. I was just looking at it just now, and we put ours on, and it was before Christmas. I can't remember the date, but it was sometime in early December. And the lowest we've got is 37% on the battery at the moment, and the highest one's 57. We've had pretty decent weather here, right enough, since the snow went away. But that's over winter, so that's pretty decent, and we'll be changing them out probably sometime towards the end of March, I would imagine. Hopefully get us through the summer.
I just want to say thank you so much to Laura and Natalie and Sweeney. That was really interesting. Really, I hope some of you will maybe go away and think about, if you haven't already got these collars, think about getting hold of them. And Laura's absolutely right. We need to be shouting about this from the rooftops, because it's a win-win for the environment and for crofters. So thank you.